This is
Brighton's Finest.
bringing the artists closer to you.
Juice.
I put a record out last year as a collaboration, Elliot Power record, with a label called Marathon, which was run by a guy that started Source Records, which was a kind of parallel to Mowax in the 90s in France. I found it quite difficult, the process, and I just felt afterwards that really it sort of, Mowax was very much about a time and a group of people, and I think that a bit like Factory Records, probably maybe just best left alone for what it represented at the time, you know. Sure. And I get, you know, with UNKLE, I get to do most of the things that I do with Mowax. Yeah. And you know, I collaborate with different musicians and artists. I get to work within the works, you know, the world of video and art, etc. But not trying to be too irresponsible. I sort of it just allows me to be responsible for myself and the community around me, rather than having to run a record label where you're trying to, you know.
Well, you released a hell of a lot of records, didn't you?
People's careers, and I just right now I don't really have that mindset at the moment.
That's totally
fine. But I never say never. But I do think that Mowax was a bit like a band, and when it split up, I'm not saying it was as good or anything as Factory, but I think when you look at something like 24 Hour Party People, it was a similar kind of dynamic in many ways, you know.
Well, I always remember seeing you with DJ Crush and DJ Shadow at the old Zap Club in Brighton.
That was good. Yeah,
that was a stunning show.
That was probably one of the first Mowax tours.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, let's fast forward then to the present. You've got another UNKLE album coming out, which is called The Road, and I think its full title is The Road Part 1. Yeah. Which begs the question: is there going to be a part 2, or is it?
I mean, that's my intention. Yeah. I'm sort of deliberating with it at the moment. It's a sort of ongoing thing. I like the title. It has a metaphor for many different things, and I kind of feel like on a creative level, it's sort of the road that you travel creating and the people you meet along the way. And in that sense, I sort of feel a bit like, you know, it might become something a bit like Bob Dylan's Never Ending Tour. You know, it might just be that might be the title that continues for a long time with UNKLE Records. I don't know. You know, it will. But that's sort of in my head at the moment. I always saw it as a trilogy, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see. Cool.
Well, you've always been about collaborations, haven't you? Ever since even in the Mowax days, and even in the early days of Mowax, and it's collaborate. You just basically thrive on collaborating with people. It seems. Is that fair to say? Is that something that you just?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the way that my way of working has developed over the years, and it's what I feel comfortable with as an artist. I'm not, you know. Somebody like DJ Shadow, for instance, is very much about, you know, a one-man army, and there's lots of artists like that, and that's amazing. And I've never really felt like that. It's always been about this sort of collage of things that become something. And in the same way that if you build a house, I sort of want to have the best plumber and the best carpenter and the best, you know, architect, rather than necessarily do it all myself. You know, that's just how it works in my head.
What I'm always impressed by is the fact that you seem to have a mixture of kind of established artists as well as new, unknown artists. So obviously you've got Mark Lanigan on this one, who's well known. You've worked with him before, but you've also got
quite a lot of players that are quite well known. You know, people like Troy from Queens of the Stone Age, or Twiggy from Marilyn Manson, and Will Malone doing strings. As far as most of the vocalists on this record are newer, you know, slightly more cult or up and coming. You know, Eska's been around a long time, but it has sort of flourished of late as a solo artist. Keaton Henson is a very interesting cult artist who has incredible success in his own right, but is still quite within his own little world. And then you've got artists like Elliot Power and Yeezy and Mink, who are just coming up now, you know.
How does an UNKLE record happen? What are the processes involved? Do you write any of the material beforehand, or you just basically call up?
Yeah. Usually you write, you know, a series of tracks that you start sending to people or getting in the studio with. We wrote about 30 before starting the record. There's also a big visual side of how it develops as well. So the process of making most of the records is you're sort of both looking at what you're doing musically and visually, and there's a whole, how that works as a community and a shared experience. The process of making this record was different from the last records because it was a lot more fluid. It was a lot less dramatic and complicated, and I always felt that making UNKLE records felt like you were building a pyramid from the top down for various reasons. From when we first started, where you were very naive and hypothetical with great ideas, through to the last record, which was just incredibly painful and built. It was all about analog sounds and the right drum takes before you have songs. So what I wanted to do on this record was make sure that the melody of the demos that we did were the main focus, and how things built from there, rhythm-wise and sound-wise, came later.
Yeah. Okay. I guess just during the course of your travels or just researching, I guess, listening to music all the time, you're just basically touching base with people and just you just get on the phone, do you? Or just meet them and...
Yeah, it's sort of how people... I suppose the easiest way to describe it is like how you meet friends. Things happen in strange, weird ways. I think the social side of it was more prevalent before because I'm older and my social life is slightly different. i.e., I'm not, I was in a club 7 days a week, when I first started. That's not necessarily the same particularly anymore, but I just you meet people through, a lot of people I met on this record came through Meltdown. There's a load of people from the past anyway that I have relationships with. Yeah. And other things just happen from people saying that they like what you do and vice versa, and you meeting up and talking about it. And if you connect, you connect. If you don't, you don't. There are certain collaborations which hasn't necessarily gone further because maybe those relationships were sort of more very there and then. The ones that are longer term are relationships that have lasted because there's a personal relationship involved rather than just a collaborative music relationship,
Brighton's finest.
Jeff Hemmings.
Jeff Hemmings.
This is
Juice 107.2.
Brighton's finest.
You mentioned Meltdown, which you curated back in 2014. Yeah. I read somewhere that this album was inspired by Meltdown in a way.
I think it wasn't inspired by Meltdown. Meltdown was a sort of catalyst for a lot of how this record started to develop. I think for me, having the last incarnation of UNKLE separated, you find yourself sort of in a period of being slightly trying to work out what you're going to do. It's like divorce, really, I suppose. You get divorced. Either you run straight back into a relationship, or you tend to sort of spin plates for a while and try and get your feet back on the ground, which is what I ended up doing. And then Meltdown happened, and it sort of gave me a musical push and sort of confidence, and just gave me that sort of that passion back again. I suppose it was very humbling. It was very inspiring to have a lot of people that were into this world that you'd been part of and helped create over the last 25 years, and that was very creatively rewarding, and it gave me a sort of, it kind of gave me a bit more fire to get back in the studio,
Okay. And you said earlier that visuals and art are a very important part of what you do. There's always an incredibly big sort of aspect of that visual in your music, whether on the stage or within your music itself. And I know that you've done quite a few sort of exhibitions recently. You did Daydreaming with Stanley Kubrick, which was last year, wasn't it? At Somerset House, which was basically you and fellow and collaborators working on aspects of Kubrick's work.
The artists reacting, so there was 69 artists that reacted to the world of Kubrick through theory, pretty more obvious routes, through screenshots, technology, in many different ways, and that ranged from musicians, sculptors, painters, so Tom from Daft Punk through to Anish Kapoor. So, and I worked on that through his wife and widow, Christiana, which was incredible.